Excited to use it. Haven't used it yet, but it's called Opus Pro.
Opus Pro.
Basically, what it does is it takes long form content and it uses AI to find the most interesting parts of it.
Okay.
Turns it into reels.
Okay.
So.
I like that.
All right. So let's do this, man. So we're just gonna kind of flow, right?
Yeah, let's let it flow. I'll let you open this. You
All right. You look good there. Let's angle. All right.
Should I keep this water bottle open?
I think it's fine, man. You can do whatever you want. I got mine on the table too. All right, here we go.
All right.
Hey everyone, it is Chris Bushnell with Movement Bank, and I am so happy and honored to be joined by the one, the only Kenyon Harris. We're gonna start that over. Nax, right? Nax, and K-N-A-X.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna do this over. All right. I'm not nervous, but all right.
Don't be nervous. I'm not a celebrity.
There you go.
Not yet.
Not yet. Hey everyone, it's Chris Bushnell with Movement Bank, and I am joined by the one, the only Kenyon Harris of the Nax Realty Group here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Kenyon, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too, man. Just an amazing human being, a U.S. Army veteran. I'm so interested in your background in aerospace engineering. Is that right?
Not quite engineering, but I did work in supply chain management
Okay.
for an aerospace and defense company for about 10 years. So I learned quite a lot about how airplanes work.
Yeah. So just that's awesome, man. And I want to talk more about that and how you went from the military to aerospace to being one of the top realtors in the city of Charlotte, right? A husband and just a contributing member of the Charlotte community and society. And man, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
This is episode 1, so I'm gonna work on my intros. We're smoothing that out a little bit.
We'll work it out.
Yeah, but yeah, man, I'm excited for this. So we've known each other for what, year and a half at this
about
point.
A year and a half, yeah.
Yeah, and I love just seeing what you're doing. I think I do think very highly of you, and when I say you're one of the top realtors in the city, I mean that. Not only I don't necessarily know what your results are, but I know the actions that you do.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators.
Right.
So what are So tell me about. So I mean, you put in a lot of work, man. I mean, you do a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
You talk with a lot of, and you help with a lot of families. Why do you do what you do?
That's a question I get asked a lot. And I think on the surface, for people that are not in real estate or mortgages, they tend to look at it from the outside looking in like, you must do that because you make a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. For me, the thing that got me into it was I wanted to do something where I felt more connected to my results. And I also wanted to directly help people, which is like the number one reason, right?
Yeah.
Like, how can I be an asset for the people around me? How can I not only work, make a good living, but also build community, also just be somebody that has influence on the folks around me.
Yeah.
So that's what drove me into real estate. It's not that I didn't like doing supply chain management or anything like that, but there is a gap there, right? So you could be working 70, 80 hours a week, and yeah, you're gonna get paid very well in that industry. You could be traveling, right? You can go to some great places like middle of nowhere, Iowa, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times you don't necessarily see the end result of your work. And you don't necessarily know the faces that are impacted by the things that you do. So for me, I started thinking about that, and that was something that I was interested in. And I have a really, really good friend who went into real estate around the same time that we moved to Charlotte. And he was just constantly on me. He's gonna get your license? You know, when are you gonna take the test? Have you been studying? And I was like, you know what? Let me lean into it. And I did, and I have not looked back since.
That's awesome. And I want to talk more about the contribution that comes from being a realtor and, you know, serving the people in our community. And you mentioned that that's a big part of your why.
Right.
Can you tell me more about that? So when you say you're making an impact in people's lives, what does that look like for you?
Well, in the practical sense, what that looks like is, I'll tell you about his family. I won't say their names, but there's a family that we've become really good friends with, right? That I met the wife at a networking event. You know, I was part of this group, National Black MBA Association, right? We met at this networking group. We just kind of stayed in touch. She's a travel agent in town, so she's building her business. I'm, of course, building a real estate business at the time. And so about a year later, I'm sitting in an open house. She comes in and she's like, oh yeah, hey, how you been doing? And I meet her husband, meet her whole family. We start talking, and they're like, we thought about looking for a house. We're ready to go and buy a house now. So they got approved for a mortgage. I helped them buy a house. And then they turned around a couple years later and they're like, you know what? The family's grown. Our family has some property or whatever that we can just kind of live in, at just like a discount rate until we decide to build something bigger, better, whatever. So you turn around and sell a house. They make a ridiculous amount of money on that investment in the course of like 2 years. And now they're out doing stuff in the community. They're growing their business. You know, they're kind of strong pillars of their family. They're helping make a financial impact in their family. So now they have family members who've seen what they did to sacrifice just to buy a house.
Yeah.
They've learned from that example. And so now other family members in other states are building wealth through real estate now.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one way you see that impact is like, it wasn't just about helping them buy or sell a house. You know, for them it was about building wealth, and then not only building it, but then showing a family member how to do it.
Yes.
Right. So that's how that impact looks like. For some situations, it's not always like the prettiest situation. You know, my business partner Daniel and I, we've done several situations where the family may be going through a divorce, right? And they have this asset that they purchased together. And, you know, I'm no fan of divorce, but sometimes people have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And they have an asset that they need to liquidate in order to go their separate ways fully. And we've had to help people go through that, and there's a lot of money involved with it. But then they split that money, and they can go off and start their new lives with a little bit of financial security, right? So it's not always the pretty, shiny thing, but that's a family that needs help. That's a family that needs somebody to help guide them through a situation, and also they're going to build, you know, some type of wealth out of the situation, right? So we can help those folks do that. So those are some of the practical ways that I see my impact, you know, from what I do.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned, and what I love about what you said is that a lot of the impact that you make, you don't see it, right? You don't see when you help a family buy a home, and then they have family who previously thought that buying a home was impossible.
Yeah.
And then they saw their family member buy a home, and then maybe there was a little light that turned on in their mind and said, okay, if they can do it, I can do it too.
That's right.
But before then, they never saw somebody buy a home. Maybe nobody in their family was a homeowner. And I think that's one of the best things that you and I do is we open up doors for people.
That's right.
Right?
Literally sometimes.
Literally. Yeah, that was not planned. That's a good pun. Write that down. But it's for so many people, and you know, I experienced this when I was young, and I grew up in sort of in a very poor area, and most people didn't own their homes.
Right.
And just the thought of home ownership was not even a thought, right? It was this is where we are, this is what our family does, this is where our cousins and our friends and everyone who we know, we live in this area that is low income and nobody owns a home, everybody rents, and this is how it is, right?
Yeah.
This is what I'm born into. And a lot of the times, all those people need to see is a different way.
Yeah.
Right? And if they had a family member who maybe had access to you, right, and had a conversation with you, and then things worked out and they actually went through that, they bought the home, that could change so many people's lives.
Right.
Because other people say, man, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the thing that I run into more than anything else is just people in the community, they need information.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they just don't have that relationship with somebody personal that can give them that information. And, our job is to kind of stand in the gap and meet that need and share information with people.
Yeah, and what's more important about that is that they can access information, but it may not be accurate information.
That's right.
Right? They get their information on social media and the news. Right? Well, guess what? The news and social media uses algorithms. The whole point of the algorithms is for you to stay on the social media for a longer period of time.
That's right.
Right? And the way that they do that is by creating content and showing you content that makes people want to read. Right? And most of the content is content that's going to result in someone having fear or anger.
That's right.
Right? It's inducing emotions.
Yep.
It's adrenaline, right? You can go on the news right now, and it's a negativity bias. Human beings just naturally have a negativity bias to where they're more prone to think about negative things than positive things.
Yeah.
There's nothing right or wrong with that. It's just naturally how we're wired. But the news and social media, they know those things.
That's right.
So if you go on, your feed right now, you'll see that a lot of things produce some type of adrenaline in you. Typically, the adrenaline is either fear-inducing or anger-inducing.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to housing, everybody says that, when rates are high, it's a terrible time to buy. When basically it's always a terrible time to buy, right? When the stock market is going down, it's a bad time to buy, right? And it's very much I'm just gonna go ahead and say it's very much a poverty mindset.
It is.
Right? Because wealthy people look at that and they say, when everybody else is doing this thing, when everybody is selling, I'm buying.
That's right.
Right? When nobody is buying, I'm buying. Because that's where you get the best discounts, that's where you get the best deals, that's where you make your money. Right? You make your money by Warren Buffett has this phrase, and it says it's like he invests when it's something like he invests when there's blood in the streets.
Yeah.
Right. The whole point is that when other people are fearful, that's when it's time to invest.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, thinking about housing, for instance, right now, 2023, if you listen to the national news,
Yeah.
they're talking about, the interest rates are so high, inventory is extremely low, the housing prices are inflated. And like you said, it's really all this negative messaging, which reinforces to some folks, I need to stay as far away from housing as possible. When in reality, if you break things down and you start to look at things from a very local perspective, you start to see that, interest rates may be up. However, the values are also going up, which means that if I buy a house, no matter what my interest rate is, right, I'm going to be building equity. And, I know you guys in the mortgage industry, you got the saying, you marry the house, but you date the rate, right?
Yeah.
And so I can get into a house today, refinance that a couple years, a year from now, maybe.
Yeah.
And drop my interest rate, drop my payments, but still have the house that I want to be in. But a lot of folks don't ever get that unless they call you, they call us, or we get a referral to speak to them. They don't really get that local messaging.
Yeah.
And, thinking about mortgages, right? Just thinking about real estate. We know where we are today in 2023, but what are some of the trends that you foresee maybe in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think it's exactly what you just said is going to happen. So we're shooting this. It's basically August 1st, right? It's a few days before August 1st. I think that today's July 27th, 2023. And right now interest rates are high, and relatively speaking, we can get into that too. But here's what I think is, based on what I see, I'm not quoting anybody, but based on what I see, most people are locking in interest rate right now somewhere between 6.5 and 7. Most people, right? And the Fed is going to come out very soon, and they're going to increase the Fed rate one more time.
Yeah.
And they will have another meeting in September where they're either going to increase the Fed rate again, or they're not going to increase the Fed rate. I believe that they're not going to increase the Fed rate. I think that this is the last interest rate increase.
Okay.
Now, when the Fed, do you know why the Fed increases the interest rate?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to control inflation.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
So exactly, you're totally right. They're bringing it up so they can control inflation. So if they stop bringing it up, what do you think that they think?
They think inflation's starting to be under control.
Exactly.
Which the last 2 quarters, I think the inflation number has kind of started to level off.
It has decelerated. So once they stop increasing the Fed rate, that means that they believe that the inflation is under control. When inflation comes under control and inflation starts to decelerate, mortgage rates will follow.
Yeah.
So here's my big bold prediction with housing is I think towards the end of 2023, rates are going to look a lot more attractive.
Yeah.
Maybe they're down into the low 6s for most people. I think into 2024 and throughout 2024, they're going to continue to go down.
Okay.
And it's going to be ebbs and flows, right? In the short term, you're going to see lots of ups and lots of downs. But in the long term over 12 months, right?
Yeah.
Not that much long term, but over the next 12 months, I do see rates going in, the mid 5s, maybe even lower than that.
That would be great.
Right? But here's the thing, is we were just talking about this, is do what the masses don't do, right? Masses, you follow the masses, you might be following something without the M. You know what I mean? Right? So do what others don't do. Right now, when you hear everyone is talking about interest rates are too high and recessions and inflation and housing shortages, and they talk about all those things and everybody's afraid to buy a house, but what are you seeing? You're seeing, I'll tell you, you're seeing seller paid closing costs.
Yeah.
You're seeing people buy homes for less than the asking price because the competition is scarce.
Yeah.
You're going out there and you're not competing with 10, 12 other families to buy a house.
That's right.
But what's gonna happen when rates go down?
A lot more buyers in the market.
Everybody. You know how many people want to buy a house right now? Want to buy a house.
A ton.
A ton.
Yeah.
Right? But they can't, either because they have an interest rate in the 2s and the 3s, and they can't get themselves to give that up and replace it with a 6 or a 6.5. Right? You have first-time home buyers who they want to buy a house so bad, they want to build equity, they want to have memories, they want to create a family, but they just can't afford it. They can't afford the monthly payment.
Yeah.
Right? You have people who their family is growing, right? And they bought a house a few years ago, and they have kids now.
Yeah.
Right? And the kids are sharing rooms, and they're just all on top of each other, but they can't buy a house because they own a house and they can't give up that low monthly payment for a much higher monthly payment, or they just can't take on the monthly payment of owning a home. There's so many people that want to buy a home, but everybody is waiting.
Yeah.
And when the time comes and everybody stops waiting, at the same time, everybody's going to be competing with each other.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to see people overbidding on homes. You're not going to see any good deals. Houses are going to go off the market in a few days. You're not going to see seller paid closing costs. You're not going to be able to take advantage of these awesome down payment assistance programs.
Right.
That's my prediction.
Yeah. It's an ugly thing to see. I mean, so 2020, during COVID, like the world changed. And one of the fundamental shifts in America was that a lot of companies just figured out we can save some overhead and let our folks work from home.
Yep.
And they can be efficient and they can be productive, right? And the value of a house intrinsically just grew, right? It really just grew exponentially.
Yeah.
Because if I can run my career out of my house, that means I don't have to commute for work. I don't have to pay for parking. I don't have to eat out every day for lunch, right? So the value of a house grew, and because of that, in 2020, when we were out showing houses, it wasn't uncommon for you to walk into a house, get a phone call from a listing agent. Hey, sorry, it just went under contract.
Yeah.
You know, and then the things that buyers had to do in 2020 to buy a house, it looked like offering a seller 10, sometimes 15% above list price.
Yeah.
And still getting outbid on the offer. It caused a lot. There's a ton of buyers out there now who bought homes in 2020, 2021 with no appraisal and no inspection contingencies.
Yeah. Sight unseen.
Sight unseen. And so now it's a house, right?
Yeah.
Over time, you're gonna have to do some repairs. Things are gonna happen. And now some of those buyers are gonna find out, unfortunately, they're gonna be underwater, or they're gonna have an expensive repair that's gonna affect the amount of equity they would be able to pull out of that investment should they choose to sell. And then not only that, you know, if we kind of take a 30,000 foot view of it, anytime our housing market or anytime the mortgage industry has to drop rates to a dramatically low number, something dramatic has happened in the world. And it literally took a global pandemic for us to get 2 and 3% interest rates.
Yeah.
Right? And what's it gonna take for us to go from 6 to 3? It's gonna take some dramatic happening in the world. And those things are not pleasant to live through, you know?
Yep.
So I think that goes back to the education piece. We have to let people know that, yeah, it may sting a little bit up front, but it's gonna be worth it in the end.
100%. I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think you're right that a lot of people don't think about what causes low interest rates. And, you know, the 2s and the 3s of 2020, 2021 were stimulus.
Yeah.
Or COVID stimulus. And, you know, what could cause rates to go in the 3s again? I don't think it's going to happen. It really would have to be a pretty dramatic event.
Oh, yeah.
And what I think, I mean, you're already seeing it. You're seeing companies go out of business. You're seeing banks go out of business. And you don't want to see those things happen. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with rates.
Yeah.
I do think, and I'm also very interested in what happens with student loans.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because you have a lot of people who are kind of struggling right now, and they're not paying their student loans.
Right.
What happens when they do?
Yeah, that could be our next bubble.
Yeah.
But I know you to be a reader. I know you like to learn. You're curious.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into like mentorship. So you mentioned a quote by Warren Buffett, which, you know, we all have some folks that are like avatars for us, or people that we don't know, but we read their thoughts and they kind of become a mentor. So speaking of mentorship, like, who's a mentor for you, you know, and what's something that you've learned from them that's helped you grow in business?
I've got a few mentors. The first person that comes to my mind, his name is Amir Syed. He is the co-founder of Growth Only Coaching.
Okay.
Shout out Amir, my man in Growth Only Coaching, Go Community. And I love that guy. He's great. He's made a huge impact on my life. And also shout out to Justin Lopatin, who also has coached and mentored me, and Alex Phelan, who currently coaches and mentors me. So I've been very blessed to have gotten a lot of great coaching and mentorship from some really amazing individuals. Amir, who I'm going to talk about here, manages a $1 billion branch.
Wow.
He's a producing branch manager. He's been in the industry for 20 years.
That's amazing.
He is, I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many people this guy has coached to some very impressive numbers. And if you were to tell me one thing that Amir has taught me, oh man, it's too much. I think that the one thing that if I were to point out one thing that Amir has taught me that has stuck with me is your consistency is your character.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And there's a lot of people who, especially in real estate or in finances, right? They go through these big highs and these big lows, and they don't really focus on just taking the consistent actions, the daily habits.
Yeah.
And I think it's just and this is any walk of life, right? It's the people who just consistently show up every single day and put in the work. Really, especially for entrepreneurs, I think that, you know, that advice will go a long way for anybody. But if you were to ask me what the best way to create financial wealth is and financial freedom is to make more money.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
How do you create more money? You have to have an entrepreneurial spirit, or for some people, an entrepreneurial spirit, where you're doing a lot of the things, you just work for somebody else.
Yeah.
So for me as an entrepreneur, someone growing my mortgage business, Amir has really guided me to just focus on the habits. Starting my days the same, ending my days the same every single day, having theme days every day. I could tell you what I'm gonna do any day, anytime, 6 months from now.
Nice.
It's all on my calendar.
Yeah.
He's helped me with just my routines and my habits, mental work, and sure, he coaches me on how to be a great mortgage loan officer.
Yeah.
But the things that he's taught me, I think, go beyond the systems and the operations of how to grow a mortgage company,
Yeah.
and much more how to be a great person, a great business person, and someone who contributes to society.
I love that. And I love the point you make about your consistency being your character, right? Because I think as a business owner, you know, it's incumbent upon you to open and close the door every day, right? And it's almost like you see the NyQuil commercials where they're like, you know, a parent can't take a day off kind of thing. Well, as a business owner, it's kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you may not necessarily be working in your business every single day, but there's going to be days where you got to work on the business. There's going to be days where you're going to have to be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like, you may not even be taking an action, but thinking about what am I going to do 6 months from now is taking action,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's just consistently showing up. I think that's great. I mean, one of my mentors is my coach, Ryan McKinney Coaching Systems. He is really awesome about taking your mindset sometimes off of the financial part.
Mm.
Because a lot of times he's like, if you think about it, if you don't have a big why
Mm-hmm.
as to what you do, you may not be motivated to take any action.
Yeah.
And he's really good about helping us focus on putting in the right inputs. So you think about one of the best analogies I could think about is like a baseball player. So the most legendary hitters in the history of baseball, they tend to hit about 300 as an average, which essentially means that they're gonna get on base 3 out of 10 times. When you think about as a salesperson, if you were a baseball player, to be good, to be considered close to legendary, you just need to win 3 out of 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put your focus on the 7 times that you miss, right, or the 7 appointments that you don't do well at, you know, the 7 days in a month where you can't set an appointment, and you know nothing quote unquote good happens that day, then you'll always have a negative kind of scarcity mindset. But if you put your focus on, I get 10 at-bats,
Mm-hmm.
and I know how to swing the bat, I know how to check where the ball's coming from. Like, if I'm gonna put my focus on anything, I'm gonna focus on being prepared to take those 10 at-bats. And then I'm gonna take those 10 at-bats. And if I hit 3 out of 10, I'm gonna be legendary.
Yeah.
You know, and so Ryan he's always on me about just focus on the inputs, right? Because some days you're gonna be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Other days you're not. But if you're consistent, then you'll start, I mean, really the results will be in your consistency, because you're gonna have positive results because you came back to it on a regular basis. Right?
Yeah. And a lot of that you can reverse engineer.
Absolutely.
All right, you can say, okay, statistically, if I do this amount of activity, it will produce this amount of results.
Mm-hmm.
If I want this amount of results, I need to do this amount of activity.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do in our. One of my other coaches is a guy, Kent Temple. He's a big time agent out of Keller Williams, one of the part owners of the office I work. And we do this like business planning clinic every year with Kent, and that's exactly what we do. Mm-hmm. We sit down, we start with how much do I need to make next year, right? And then we reverse engineer that all the way back down to how many appointments a month, a week do I need to hit, mm-hmm. right? And it gives you a target. It gives you a target to aim for. And it also helps you in a more practical sense. Not only does it give you a target to shoot at, it also gives you an idea of what the state of the industry and your business is. Mm-hmm. Because if I got 30 other people that went through the same clinic and they're sticking to that script, you know, let's say the calendar has changed from October to March. Mm-hmm. Now I got a few people I can go to and say, well, what are your numbers looking like? Here's what I'm seeing. And now we can start to trade information, and we can say, well, it looks like for everybody in our local group here, you know, maybe appointments are really high, but maybe not as many people are going under contract. Mm-hmm. Why is that, right? So not only can we reverse engineer, like you said, we can also do some problem solving if we set solid goals, you know?
Yeah, I'm interested in what those inputs are. So if I'm a new realtor and I'm looking for a little guidance on, hey man, like how do I start? What do I do? What are some of those inputs that you focus on?
So the number one thing you need to think about as somebody new getting into the real estate industry is you need to have as many conversations with people that you know and don't know as possible. Like your goal is to have as many conversations as you can as quickly as possible. You have to do it every day, right? So when I first started full-time in real estate, I had a list of like expired listings, and I just called them one by one. I didn't have any 3-line dialers or anything. I literally got on my cell phone and I called those people one by one. Hey, I saw your listing expired. When do you want to get that house back on the market? I did that for a couple of months straight, and then I changed. The team I was with went independent and all of that. Came back to Keller Williams, joined Max Group, and from there I started calling old buyer leads who went to open houses.
Okay.
Calling buyer leads from like 2-3 years prior to that.
Nice.
Hey, you came to an open house at 123 Main Street 2 years ago. Just wondering, you still in the market for a house, right? Mm-hmm. I started calling people who had a house in a neighborhood where, you know, folks had sold houses, and I just start calling. The number one thing is you have to put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. And you can only do that through having conversations with people. That's the number one thing. The number two thing really is you need to create a schedule for yourself. Because here's the truth, right? Most people get into real estate because they want to, you know, control their own schedule.
Yeah.
But then they get into real estate and they don't have a schedule. Mm-hmm. So how can you control what you don't have, right? Mm-hmm. So first things first, what are you doing from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. every single day? What does that look like, right? Because if somebody calls you and they're like, hey, yeah, I want to see this house today. Can you show it to me at 4:30? But you don't have a schedule. Now you're either chasing that person, right? Or you're stressed because you're trying to move all this stuff around. Mm-hmm. If you got a calendar and you know where you're going to be, then I can say, look, today at 4:30 doesn't work, but how about 2? Or can you do 6, right? The way you control your time is knowing what you're doing with it, right? Yeah. So that's the number 2 thing. Have a schedule. Of course, talk to as many people as possible. And number 3, really, you have to seek out some type of mentorship. You need to be in some type of coaching, some type of group where you can share ideas. For me, when I started, Keller Williams has a program called Bold, and basically it's a sales course. It was a 9-week sales course, every Thursday, we met all day. We practiced scripts. We had goals and objectives we had to meet. It was a big financial burden. It was like $800
Mm-hmm.
for somebody. It's like, okay, I just quit my job. I got a set amount of reserves, and you want me to pay $800? And the way it was presented to me was kind of like, you may say you can't afford to do it, but it's almost like you can't afford not to.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But you go there, I still use the scripts from the first boat I went to.
Really?
You know what I mean? So that mentorship, that coaching, I'm sitting in a room completely anxious. I got imposter syndrome all over me because there's people in that bowl room who have teams and they're mega agents and they're making millions of dollars, and they're in there doing the same thing I'm doing. They're tracking their numbers, they're tracking their appointments, they're doing script practice with other agents. And for me, at first, I rejected it. I was afraid of it, right? But then I started to think about it like, well, if that person's doing it and they have a mega team, why am I not doing that?
Yeah.
Right? So let me imitate what they're doing. And that's what coaching does, right? Coaching gives you a mirror. It gives you something to look at, to ask yourself what is being reflected back to you, right? And I don't know, I'm just a big fan of it. I mean, whether you're doing a paid coaching program where you're talking to somebody one-on-one like you do, like I do, or if you're in a group coaching setting where it's a group of people, masterminds, or if you have some type of online, there's online coaching programs that you don't have to pay for.
Yeah.
Motivational stuff, all that stuff helps, but you have to be consistently doing it,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's consistently showing up, right? And I think, we can go down different routes here, but we keep coming back to the same things, just consistently doing those small habits.
That's right.
Right? It's, like you can get coaching once a year. That's not going to do anything for you. It's consistently meeting with your coaches. You also mentioned the community aspect of it too, masterminds, which I'm also a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Right? That there's, so I have a saying that I've said for a long time, is just I don't believe that there's no such thing as self-made. Right?
I love that.
We could all use a little bit of help along the way.
Yeah.
Whether it's our coaches, our mentors, our peers who are going through the same things as we're doing, and we get to mastermind with them and talk about ideas and strategies, whether it's our family, right, our friends.
Yeah.
All of these people help us achieve these goals, because you and me, I know you're like me, right? I have some pretty lofty goals.
I do too.
Some people don't, right? And if you don't have lofty goals, you don't need to hear any of this. But if you do, and if you're like Kenyon and me, you've got to get help, right? Because it's like you had said something, you can't afford not to.
Right.
It's going to take so much longer without the help. It's going to cost so much more in the long run.
Yeah.
And to have coaches, to surround yourself with not only just your peers, but people who are doing more than you.
Yeah.
So Amir, my mentor Amir, he actually has levels to it. He says that he encourages me to be surrounded by people who are above me, right? So people who have already achieved the goals that I want to achieve, people who are at the same level as me. So these are my peers, right? These are people who are loan officers just like me, going through the trenches, building their business in real time,
That's right.
facing the same sorts of challenges and adversities that I experience, and also people below me, new loan officers, people who are trying to figure it out, people who they're looking for mentorship.
Yeah.
And there's another saying, it's like, if you want to learn something, the best way to learn something is to teach it.
Yeah.
So having the 3 levels is, I think, the best way to master something.
I think so too. Because it gives you more of a 360 perspective, right? Because you're learning from somebody who has been through it before. You yourself, you're doing the activities, right? So you're like gaining experience by doing it and then teaching it to someone else. It just kind of gives you like a whole 360 kind of perspective. And I've done some of that too. You know, it puts you in a different mind state to be like teaching something, which also I guess what it reinforces to me, like if I'm gonna go teach somebody something, I probably need to know how to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's great. I think coaching is so important, not only to entrepreneurs, but you know, people who are professionals, because you're the CEO of you.
Yes.
You know, there's some folks that I've been in mastermind groups with who they don't have their own businesses, but you know, they're like VPs at a bank.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these folks are like, you know, mid-level managers at some corporation, and they're trying to get better. They're trying to better themselves. And I think one of the most important things for anybody doing any type of profession is to always be looking at ways to grow.
Yes.
You know, you may not, let's face it, there's gonna be years where you're gonna have you're just gonna knock it out the park.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna hit every goal, you're gonna exceed everything. There's gonna be other years where maybe you don't. But if you're constantly trying to better yourself, it'll help you kind of get through some of those tough times. It'll help you to stay on the course, right? I think a lot of times we just fall apart because we don't really have somebody coaching us through things.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's like super, super important.
Yeah, it's very much, you're right. You have to continue to grow. And, you know, it's very much like real estate, right? Where there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? There's going to be highs and lows and highs and lows. But if you look at a chart over the last 100 years, if you look at a long-term chart, it goes up.
That's right.
And that's the same thing with growth in a person, right? As long as you're actively doing it, right? And focusing on how can I be the best version of myself?
Yeah.
You're gonna have highs, you're gonna have lows. Especially, I mean, we're entrepreneurs. There's always highs and lows,
Absolutely.
right? But if you were to look at it from a grander scheme, a more long-term vision, it's going up.
Yeah.
Right? Even if this month was down, or this week was down, or this day was down, it's going up.
That's going up.
Yeah.
Overall.
And I also want to mention, because I know you mentioned your friends who work at banks and, you know, VP positions. We're talking about entrepreneurship, which I believe everyone should do something, right, to earn more income. And entrepreneurship follows the same guidelines.
Yeah.
Right? You're just, instead of working for yourself, you work for a company, but you are still the CEO of yourself.
That's right.
Right? And so whether you're a VP or a director of a big company or whoever, you're leading yourself, and that's how people are going to follow you. Right? You influence other people, because, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you're at that level, you are helping other people.
Right.
Right? And it's important to be able to influence those people and to have an influence on their lives. And the way that you do that is just by being the best version of yourself.
Yeah. And that's how you build, you know, one of the new buzz terms is social capital.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you build that social capital, right?
Yeah.
Is you need to be an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
And not in the sense of, you know, you have nice pictures on Instagram, right? Being an influencer in that if somebody in your community needs something, you can connect them.
Yeah.
You know, I know folks who are just like amazing at just doing what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been able to leverage that in their personal relationships. You know, it's almost like, man, my pastor years ago, he was talking about how him and his family were stationed outside of Chicago when he was in the military. And he's like, we got great friends there, right? Because of just the person he is, right? He's like, the thing about us is we make friends everywhere we go, right? And it's not because they're pushovers, it's not because they're passive, but it's because they live their lives the way it should be lived, and they do what they say they're gonna do, right? They're consistent. So they've been able to kind of create influence. And so he's like, no matter where I go, if I'm there for any significant amount of time, we're gonna make friends. And I think for, you know, corporate professionals, let's say you're going up the corporate ladder, right? You know, you don't wanna be burning bridges. Like, you know, the old cliche goes, don't burn a bridge, but try to leave every place better than it was when you got there.
Yeah.
And it's the same for us as entrepreneurs. If we sit down with someone and we're gonna talk to them about, you know, what does it mean to get approved for a mortgage, buy a house, whatever. and maybe the time isn't right for them right now. They should at least walk away from the conversation with some type of information that has enhanced their life in some way, right? Or given them some tool that can be used later, right? Or maybe someone else they know can use it. So never look at it, we have to stop looking at things as like wasted opportunities. And we have to look at everything as like an opportunity. If it's not to, to grow from it or benefit from it, then it's an opportunity to inform and educate.
Yeah. Giannis, the basketball player, he had an interview not too long ago, and I'm gonna butcher it, but an interviewer asked him if he thought the season was a loss or a waste because they didn't win the championship, and he said something along the lines of, "Was every season that Michael Jordan didn't win a championship, was that a waste of time?" No.
It wouldn't be the greatest.
Exactly. Right? Because it's sometimes it's the downs that propel us to the highs.
Yeah.
Right? It's the losses that propel us to the wins. It's the lessons that we learn oftentimes through some type of challenge or adversity that helps us become the person we want to be.
That's right.
We talked about impact earlier, and what I'm starting to find is that often we're able to impact the people who are going through the same challenges and adversity that we had once gone through.
Yeah.
And had we had not gone through those challenges and those adversities, would we be able to impact those people?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have any tools or experiences that could help those people.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that. Like, we're out here doing what we do every day, not solely to make money. Like, yes, if I think it's Earl Nightingale that says, if a man does like an honest job, for a worthwhile goal, then he can be considered successful in a sense. And it's not just money, yeah, we live in America, we need money.
Yeah, for sure.
But if I can go out there, help people learn something, educate them, help them better themselves, better their lives, then I'm already achieving a certain level of success. The thing is, when you're not, for say, like in the coaching program, you a lot of times will be in a situation where you're in that slump and you don't have anything to remind you to remind yourself that, hey, you know what? Things are pretty good. I've been through this before, I can get through it again. And that's one of the reasons why I think coaching is so important, because that's what coaches do a lot of times. You tell you, like, hey, look at your numbers. You're doing pretty good. Compared to everybody else, you're doing okay. So I think that's important. Speaking of that, sales slumps, for instance, like, what would you say to somebody in the sales industry who may be going through a slump? Like, what advice would you give them to get through that?
Yeah. So in any type of sales or business, you had already said it through your coach, Ryan. Focus on the inputs. Right? Focus on the inputs, because often what I found is, early in my career, I'd be guilty of this, where I'd almost get burnt out, right? I'd be going through a slump, and that slump was, in my mind, causing me to not do the input anymore. And if we don't do the input, we're not going to have the results. If we don't have the results, that's how we're going to go into a slump. And I think it's very much, leading indicators and lagging indicators. So here's the thing, is if we're in a slump, what I would do, I would 10x my activity. And leading indicators, lagging indicators, activity is the leading indicators. And often, we don't actually see the results of that until 3 to 6 months later. So if we're in a slump, there's a story about a cow and buffalo, I don't know if you ever heard this story.
No.
There's a herd of cow and there's a herd of buffalo, and they're in the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
And a big storm comes by. And it's a big thunderstorm, and it's rolling over the mountains. It's coming over the cow and the buffalo.
Yeah.
And the cow, who are slower animals, they run away from the storm. So the storm is coming from the west going east, and so the cows run east, away from the storm.
Yeah.
And what happens is the cows are running east and they're going slow, and the storm is following them. And then they get caught in the storm. And the more they run in the opposite direction, the more they run away from the storm, and to try to avoid the storm, the longer they're in the storm.
Yeah.
Right? The buffalo run through the storm. Right? The buffalo just face it, just take it on right in the face. And they run through the storm. And as the storm is going east to west, the buffalo are running east.
Yeah.
Right into it.
Right.
And what happens is the buffalo come right out of it. Right? So when we're facing these adversities with these sales slumps, my advice, go through it.
Yeah.
Take massive action. And don't focus so much on the lagging indicators right now. Focus on how much input can I do, and then just have faith that historically, if you do this amount of input, you're going to have this amount of output. Right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's what I would say. I would say just massive action, and the sales slump will go away.
Yeah. I think you're right. I agree with that. I think the thing is, it's gonna come. Like the ups and downs, the storms, they're gonna come. But you that's why you train, right? That's why you go to coaching. That's why you set your schedule. You do the things. You put your inputs in every single day, and eventually, right, things are gonna happen. Now, there's always some external pressures that could, greatly affect what you do. Maybe more than it's all like always going to be something that's out of your control.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to just be steady. You know what I mean? And I like the fact that you gave the analogy about the buffalo, because when you see them, like if you see videos of them in like these huge snowstorms, or like if they're being attacked by wolves, they just all just kind of hunker down.
Yeah.
And they face whatever the threat is. And that's why they don't have a lot of natural prey or predators that can kill and eat them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're massive animals anyway, but they huddle together and they face it.
Yeah.
And we have to do that too in our entrepreneurial lives. We have to do that. We got to hunker down, make the calls, take the appointments, because I think sometimes what happens is, like we look at now, we've talked about how inventory may be down real estate wise, and buyers have a little bit less affordability and stuff like that. But for those of us that can stay consistent and basically weather the storm, coming out of it, we're gonna have a lot more market share that belongs to us.
Yeah.
So that may look like you doing 10 million in revenue in 2022 and 21, and then 2023, you may have to do 3 or 4 to weather the storm. But coming to 24, 25, that market share for all those people that left, that market share may belong to you now.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think that's a really, really great thing.
Yeah, and to further that, I think that the worst thing that somebody can do when they're in the sales slump is stop or quit. And we're both seeing it. I mean, a lot of people who I respect as great realtors are getting out of the industry.
Yeah.
The same thing with loan officers. They're getting out of the industry. People who have had a lot of success in the industries are just leaving.
Yeah.
And it's because it is a down market for sure, and you're seeing a lot of people are not having the success that they want. But I think that the hard times will almost cloud our vision, and not necessarily make us forget about our whys, right? But maybe make it seem like our goals are further away than what they actually are.
Yeah.
Right? So if I have these big lofty goals and I'm not close to them, I'm not seeing the traction or the progress that I want, it's easy, and I'm guilty of this too, of thinking that, man, I'm so far away, like what's even the point?
Right.
Maybe I should lessen my goals. Maybe I should just give up, right? But I think that most people, especially entrepreneurs, where it's almost like our biggest enemy is ourselves.
Yeah.
Our biggest critic is ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's a depth perception issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to not realize that it's right over the mountain.
Yeah.
We're so close. And the worst possible thing that we could possibly do, any entrepreneur or anyone in general, is to be so close to the goal
Yeah.
and give up.
Yeah.
And that would be my advice for anybody in sales, real estate, mortgages, any entrepreneurial endeavor, is that, man, you can't give up. That's the worst thing you can possibly do, right? Just go a little bit further.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, you do. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is he's in the fitness industry, and he's an investor, a real estate investor. We were talking, and I was telling him, for me, like, real estate has to go to zero before I can be like, all right, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, explain what you mean by that. And I'm like, well, for me, it's almost like, it's like I like to take a good hike, from time to time, and it's like you're going in this mountain range and you're doing some hiking, and there's a ridge that you want to hit because it's got an amazing waterfall, for instance, and you're like, it's gonna take me 2 hours to get there, and this is a tough climb, and this kind of sucks, but if I've got 24 hours allotted to get there, and I know it's only gonna take me 2, I can take a breather, I can get some water, but I have to keep going to get there. But the only reason why I won't get there is I injure myself, which would, kind of be like going to zero, so to speak, right? So when you think about real estate, you think about sales, any business, a lot of folks get nervous and then they take the massive actions, because massive actions can be both positive and negative.
Yeah.
A lot of folks take their massive action from the fear, and sometimes people take that action too quick. Whereas you should take your massive action from your inspiration, right? Because fear can inspire you, it can motivate you.
Yeah.
It can motivate you to do something that's great, it can motivate you to do something that's negative. But I think a lot of times we take that massive action just a little bit too quickly. And it's not to say that you're gonna be great today and you're gonna stay great forever and you're gonna, take a bunch of market share and be a leader in an industry forever. That's not to say that's the case, because that's not true. However, what we do know is that if you put the work in and you're doing the right inputs, if you do that consistently, you're going to get positive results.
Yeah.
It just takes, sometimes you gotta see the zero.
Exactly.
Sometimes you gotta step on it. You may even have to step over it sometimes to get to that next ridge, to get to the highest heights. And it's scary. Being an entrepreneur is scary. It's just like the meme says, like, some parts of the day you're gonna be happy, other parts you're gonna be stressed out. But it's all worth it.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Let's take a quick break right here. Just about a real quick.
Gotcha.
This is good.
Yeah, man, this is fun.
Yeah. We're back. All right. Yeah, so all very interesting stuff, Kenyon. So, you know, we've talked about mindset, and we've talked about, you know, how to get out of a slump. What are some ways for people to win right now in this market? Whether you're a home buyer, whether you are a realtor,
Yeah.
What advice do you have someone who's either a home buyer or a realtor looking to win in this market?
So I think, you know, for home buyers right now, you need to be, you know, stacking up some money, right? You got to have some cash saved up because you want to have some money for your down payment, your closing costs. But also, more importantly, on the front end, you want to have some money for a very aggressive due diligence fee, earnest money deposit, simply because, yes, we're in a seller's market, right? It just means that there's way more buyers than sellers. There are a lot of buyers have left the market. However, we are still buyer heavy enough to where when you approach a seller with an offer, it needs to be something that could trigger that seller to accept it or at least engage you in negotiations. So number one for buyers, have a little bit of money stacked up because you may want to convince a seller to take your offer based off your due diligence fee. And then the other thing for buyers right now, in any other time, find a professional, work with a professional, right? Because the market shifts so quickly, and if you're not working with a market expert, you may not know what's going on in the market from day to day. You can speak to how mortgages can change 4 or 5 times in a day.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing. For real estate agents right now, if you're getting into the game, you too need some money, right? You need to have some cash stacked up. You know, if at all possible, I would say 6 to 9 months worth of income, packed up, stacked up, because you may have to live off of it for a moment, or maybe you need, you know, some gig work to get you through. Because here's the thing, the lead time from you meeting the lead, that lead going under contract, that seems to have lengthened a bit.
Yeah.
That's gotten a lot longer, so you need to prepare for that. Also for realtors right now getting into the industry, start thinking about how you would use some artificial intelligence. I mean, it's the most talked about thing on the planet today. And, you know, let's be honest, we live in a reactionary world.
Yeah.
Everybody's reacting to it. So start figuring out ways that you may be able to use it. You don't have to build it, you don't have to write the code, but if there's a way you can implement that into your business structure to help you figure out, you know, what to do with that. I can speak for our team.
Yeah, I'm interested.
We have some, you know, some software that has some AI enabled that can have some front end conversations with potential leads.
Okay.
Until we take over the conversation. It's not there to do a transaction for us. To be honest with you, I don't feel like it's the most intelligent thing in the world. However, it can hold the person's attention for a day. And if it gives me time to reach that person and have a voice-to-voice conversation, then that's all I needed to do. Right?
Yeah.
I can take over from there. So realtors, because AI is the future.
Yes, it is.
For realtors, you know, start learning a little bit about it, see if there's ways you can use it, and then have some money stacked up so you can survive for a few months, especially if you're gonna go full time. And then for buyers, have a little bit of cash stacked up because when you go to buy a house, you wanna be able to cover your closing costs, down payment. Doesn't mean you can't tap into down payment assistance programs, which are absolutely fantastic, but it's also like never a bad time to have money stacked.
Exactly.
So just do it.
That's good advice. Just stack up some money. I agree. No, you're totally right though, right? It is the most important thing, and I tell people this all the time. It's like even if you do get down payment assistance, and you have money stacked up and you don't use it all, is it better to have money stacked up and not need it, or need it and not have it, right? And that's going back. I mean, I get it. You know, we all have bills, and people are taking care of families and they have kids, and it's easier said than done, but it's just so important to be able to find ways to make more money.
Yeah.
right? Whether it's the gig work or something online. I mean, you can go online, you can Google or use AI to find so many different things.
Yeah.
YouTube, doing ads, and that's just like you had said too. And I do think we're going into a transitionary market where, you know, people may not see this. You know, we're doing this in July 27th, 2023. People may not see this until next year.
Right.
And by that time, you might really need that money because you're going to have to bid more than what the asking price of the house is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
So, you know, let's say I'm looking to become a loan officer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, right now, what are some of the things I need to be doing to have the most success?
It's all the same things, right? I think what realtors do and what loan officers do are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have money stacked up, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of expenses. You're going to spend money, right? You're going to spend money on coaching, on marketing, on different software programs. And if you don't have money saved up, it's just, you're setting yourself up for failure. And get around people who can help you. It's all the same thing we've just been talking about. Get around coaches, mentors, peers. Very much get on a routine.
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing. You mentioned that earlier as well. Know what your days are going to look like. Start and end your days the same exact way every single day, and take massive action.
Yeah.
And man, I can tell you, you know, I'm very proud of the results that I've had, and a lot of people don't realize, like, I very much came out of the gates swinging.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of success very early,
Mm-hmm.
and it was because I still haven't met the person to take more action than me.
There you go.
And I hope somebody listening can be that person, because I think you'll do all right if you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And follow up like crazy.
Follow up like crazy.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's the key. Well, man, look, this has been fantastic. Man.
Yeah, I agree.
I've had a really good time. We always have good talks.
Yeah.
So I think this is great. I'm glad we're putting it out there,
Mhm.
and let's do this more consistently.
Yes, thank you, Kenyon Harris, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate you so much. How can the people get in touch with you?
You can find me naxgroup.com, of course, and you know, Instagram. I'm at Ken Soldit, KenSoldit. Yeah, I'm out there. Call me, text me, inbox me, email me, smoke signals, fly kite, whatever you got to do.
There you go, little Batman signal.
I'm around.
Like a K in the sky, right? And I'm Chris Bushnell. You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Chris Bushnell Homes. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kenyon.
Yeah, man. Good deal, man.
It's good.
It's good, man. I enjoyed it.
All right, man. Let's hope that audio came out great. I think it did. And we